Perceiving energy. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. So the inspiration for this vlog comes from a couple of interactions I've had fairly recently. One of them actually was in the comment section of one of these vlogs, an old vlog that is on the Chi Life channel. I think the title of it was, I think it was something like, "How do we know the meridians are real?" And in that vlog, I talk about and demonstrate and exercise and talk about how you can actually feel the meridians. So you can actually perceive them for yourself. And someone put a comment in there. I can't recall exactly what they said, but along the lines of like, "That's not right. It's just feeling them doesn't mean that they're there." And essentially you need to have charts and stuff to find them or know them. Yeah, I don't recall exactly what it said, but now often when someone leaves a comment along those lines just saying, that's not right or whatever, I often won't necessarily engage with those sorts of comments because often it's not productive. Someone has their strong opinion, often not always well reasoned, but they have their strong opinion, and just engaging with that isn't going to be productive for anyone involved. But occasionally I will, and so with this comment, there was actually, I didn't feel like it was just pure opposition, unreasoned opposition to a concept. And there were actually some interesting details within that comment about the epistemology of the whole idea. So the structure of knowledge, or the nature of knowledge itself. And the comment, I recall, it mentioned about cultural influence and how that shapes things and things like that. And I thought, there's actually something interesting to reply to there. And maybe there's something productive, either for that person who left the comment, and the interaction, there might be something useful there, or also for other people reading those comments, maybe something useful comes out of that. And so I did comment back and forth several times, and eventually sort of got to a point where, the person seemed to get more what I was saying, and it made more sense to them. And so, yeah, that was great. And again, maybe some other people will get some value out of that too. Because it is quite common for people to have an idea that, oh, you can't actually perceive energy. I'll come back to that later, because I think that's a strange position or perception to have. Like, if you really think it through, I think that's quite strange. But a lot of people haven't really thought it through fully, and that's partly why I'm making this vlog, talk about it a little bit more. The other experience I had just recently is, as you might know if you've been watching the vlogs from the last one, I was at a festival quite recently, and all sorts of things go on there. And as part of that, I went and I actually had a massage or bodywork treatment, depending on how you want to refer to it, by someone I know. I'd never had a treatment from her before, but as I was walking past the stand where she was doing it, I thought, you know what, that might be quite good. I'll give that a try. And the type of treatment, it's actually from a Maori tradition, a Maori basis. So Maori are the native people in New Zealand, and it comes from their traditions. And it was a pretty good treatment. I think there was some benefit from it, which was great. And she's quite experienced in this form of treatment. And there were actually a whole group of them all doing the same type of treatment in that same area. And amongst them, there was someone who's younger, less experienced. And while she was doing the treatment on me, I also know this other guy as well. So sort of chatting back and forth a little bit. And she was saying to him, she really wants to help him to learn to be able to see the energy and see what's going on. and so I became involved in this conversation a little bit too, and saying, yeah, that's a really helpful thing. Um, and so that the combination of these two things made me think like, hey, that could be good to make a little bit of a vlog about this idea of perceiving the energy. And you'll notice I'm using the word perceive because sometimes it's common for people to talk about seeing. Um, but sometimes using that terminology can become a bit of a stumbling block for people because they then think it's literally about using your vision, your eyesight to see something. And it can be that sometimes, but often when perceiving energy, it actually involves many other senses. And sometimes it's more of an internal perception and recognition. So you are using sense of whatever combination of types to perceive. It's not necessarily visual. It's not necessarily restricted to just one sense, but to be able to recognize and have a clear perception of what's happening with the energy. And yeah, so I'll talk about a few different parts of this because it really is a useful skill to have, and it's useful to understand even just that this is possible. I think a good analogy for this is if you think of someone flying an aircraft. Um, Now, those aircraft, particularly if you're talking about large jetliners, sometimes they will fly just using their instruments. So the pilots can't necessarily see anything about where the plane is going, right? If they're flying through cloud or what have you, it's like there's just cloud everywhere. They can't actually see where they're going. But they have the instruments, including maps and things, to guide them, and they're like, cool, we can fly using instruments. But whenever, particularly if there's something tricky they need to do with changing environment around them, certainly when they're taking off, when they're landing, or they're, having to deal with a changing situation, if possible, as well as using the instruments, they will also want to see so they can directly see what's happening so they can respond as precisely and effectively to it as possible. There's a similarity to this in working with our energy because often people don't have much perception of the energy to begin with. And at that stage, they need to rely on the maps, the maps that others have created. And often they can get a lot of benefit relying on those maps that can take them through a lot of this applies both to self-practice, where you're doing practices. You can get a lot of benefit simply by, even if you can't really perceive it, following the map, following what someone else, who I hope did have perception, was able to lay out for you, and follow that, and that's, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. It also applies to treatment, right? Where the maps are generally pretty reliable, and even if you can't directly perceive, you can, it's like flying by instruments. You can't necessarily see for yourself, but like, oh, this is where it says I need to go, this is what it says I need to do, and you can give a lot of benefit to people using that as well. But particularly in dealing with more challenging, more difficult circumstances, and even just to have a more refined, detailed understanding and control of what you're doing, well, of course, it's helpful to see or perceive directly for yourself, um, and that is possible. There's this, I guess, limitation that often people put in, because if they've only ever been taught to follow the map, to fly by instruments, they can then assume that, well, that's the only way you can do it. But does that make sense? Who made the map? Who made the map? So someone at some point had to perceive what was going on in order to create the map of where the energy flows and so on. But there's, I guess often there's this gap that appears in people's knowledge, or their conception of it, where they don't recognize, like, well, of course someone had to be able to perceive it, so or we wouldn't have a map. So why not you? Why can't you also perceive it? Well, there can be lots of reasons why you personally can't, but of course, this implies that it is a possible thing to be able to perceive that energy. So early on in someone's practice, again, often it's common to not really be able to perceive the energy very well, and that's not too much of a problem if they follow the map, follow the guidance that they've been given well, they'll get a lot of benefit. Um, and little by little they can start to develop that perception. And there's also a little bit of a safety feature built in there, in that early in your practice, you're not actually generally going to be so effective at moving or directing the energy anyway. So if you do make some minor mistakes and so on, the consequences aren't going to be so great from that anyway, because you're not directing things as effectively as you will later on. As you start to become more effective at directing the energy, generally you're also starting to gain more experience and more capability of perceiving it directly for yourself, and so that lines up quite nicely, and you're able to be more precise in what you're doing. So yeah, I think it's really helpful to understand that as a possibility. And recognize that it's not just, you don't have to continue to just fly by instruments, or you can think of it in some things as like trying to operate with a blindfold on. Can you do it? Yeah, you can like find your way through, but much easier if you can have that direct perception for yourself, which can include visual. It can literally include visual, but often it includes, other pieces of our awareness that leads to a different type of perception. That's why I think perceiving the energy is a better term to use than just seeing energy. So yeah, hopefully that maybe answers a few questions for some people, or maybe gives you a little bit of an insight of maybe what you can expect as you continue on your Qigong journey. I assume a lot of people who watch this vlog probably practice Qigong. Maybe some don't, but I assume probably most people who watch this do. And you can expect that you might start at a point where you follow the maps, you follow the charts, you follow the specific practices that you've been taught. That's a great place to start. But over time, you can and should really develop your own direct perception. And some people this will come to more naturally, more easily than others. There is such a thing as having talent, having natural predisposition to have different skills. And for other people, it will take more work, more practice over time to develop that. And both of those are okay. It's interesting. Often, talent is great, of course, to have natural ability. Often in the long run, people have to work harder, that it doesn't come easily to, in the long run, often actually end up going further because they do work harder at it, and that gives them, in a way, a richer understanding of the process, because they had to work really hard to get there. So if you're someone who doesn't have a great level of perception of your energy just yet, that's fine too. If you feel the benefits or enjoy your Qigong practice in other ways, great. Don't feel like you have to rush to be able to perceive your energy, or you're somehow deficient in some way by not being able to perceive it. Your process might just be a little bit longer, or maybe there are some other little pieces maybe that need to come into your practice, or your understanding of practice, that will help you with that. But if you're getting benefit in other ways, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But yeah, having an awareness that you can develop a true direct perception, and that this is useful, I think that's helpful. I hope you've enjoyed the vlog. Hopefully some useful insights for you in there. I might actually also write an article about this topic, because there's a few different pieces to this idea of perceiving the energy that it might be helpful to lay out in a nice, orderly, structured way that is easier to do sometimes in writing, rather than this, which is a more sort of informal have a chat sort of format. So I might do that as well. If I do, yeah, maybe I'll put a link to that in the description below. There might not be, the article might come later, but maybe if you're watching this a bit later, there might be a link to an article below that you can check out. If you did like the vlog, please, actually like it. Click the like button. That's always helpful. I assume that means that maybe YouTube will show it to more people because it means that people like it. But and you can comment, subscribe, share, all those good things. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.